on your franchisor hat and tell me, how do you find franchisees that fit the Williams culture?
I have not done very well at that. We were, we were on a great program of franchising, thanks to a young man named Tim Williams. Without him, there would be no franchise. He asked me for a job, and I told him, make your job. He said, well, I can do some franchise stores. I said, well, okay, do that. That's how you get paid, but you can't have it in my money. I need every penny that the company is making right now, so you go make a job. And he did. He got people to buy into the program and open stores, and that's how he got paid. We ran out of people inside of the company to grow stores, so we went outside of that, and with people with money. That did not work very well for me, because those persons thought that you could open a store, you could go home, you can look at your phone, or you could call me from Hawaii to see how I was doing, and it just didn't work. So I closed down the franchise business a few years ago. We'll get back into it probably next year through a program that Collison is working on. But I do not want a store if it's not run well, and we have stores that are not doing well, and I don't like that. I've worked too hard to earn your trust, and for you to play so loosely with it is just frustrating to me. So we're not doing the franchising right now. We're building the infrastructure that we need to validate our business. So when we do come back, hopefully with people inside the company, and hopefully we can recruit some of the people out here today.
And Mr. Williams, the young lady you mentioned that started with you, now you actually, and I read, I think it was a big article in the news about it, you actually gifted her a franchise, is that correct?
That's true. The lady that first started with me, I gifted 2 stores to her. Later on, a few years ago, I gifted a store to 2 other employees that work with me. One is in South Dallas on Martin Luther King. She's doing very well. She turned a store that was running $500,000 for me into $1 million sales store. That's how good she is. She has the experience. The other lady opened in Fort Worth. I gifted her a store. She didn't do as well because she didn't have the experience. Experience is so important. So you can say and look at all the good numbers, and I can tell you a glossy story, but you got to get in and work it and make it work. And it'll work if you work it. But she's still with me as a manager. She'll assume that store again in another year.
All right, well, guys, that's great insight. You know, one of the things too that's so important, we often hear all these young entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs, they all talk about scaling. I want to scale my business. How do I scale? What do I need to do to scale? Let's talk about scaling. Mr. Parrish, when did you know it was time to grow from store number 1 to store number 2?
Well, in the McDonald's system, you never, when you first come in, most young people think they can take a bunch of restaurants. But I had a nephew I got in a couple years ago in Oregon, and they were going to offer him like 3 restaurants. Now when I got in, I got 1. 2 years later, I got a second. 2 years after that, I grew very slow. And so we made the deal, he's going to get 3 restaurants. And I said, why don't you take 1 like the first month, 1 the second month, 1 the third month? He's like, no, I want them all at the same time. And then you go through the little training program. And guess what? It wore him out. It wore him out. And about 3 months in, I said, hey, if you had to do it again, what would you do? He said, take 1. Then maybe wait 2 months and take the next one in 2 months. So scaling I took very serious. My second was on Buckner and Bruton, still on the same street, Mr. Williams talking about Ledbetter. And this was in 1991, 2 years later. And I remember a Sunday school teacher, and as Mr. Williams said, hey, look, I'm on bended knee, praying guidance in my program. And I remember a Sunday school teacher told me, she says, it's like, man, I'm about to get this next door, and what am I gonna do? Because like a couple months later, getting it. She said, you walked that road before. And I thought about what she said. You walked that road before, open up 1, so open up 2. So I grew very slowly, but what I found is if you have the systems, the people in the systems, and probably the financials too, and it could be 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, whatever order. But McDonald's, and I'm sure Williams, I've had the privilege of visiting with Mr. Williams and his franchisees, there's systems you have in place. And so if you can master those systems and you have the people to master those systems and you have the financials, and when I say systems, operations, synonymous, then you could grow. But I didn't grow fast. The thing is, I've been around McDonald's long enough. McDonald's fail. McDonald's restaurants fail. But you as a consumer don't know it. Because either the company come in with company employees or they get another franchisee. It may not shut its doors, but that franchisee failed. And they probably failed because either operations or they lived above their means. But I grew very slow, Mr. Golden. I'm glad I did. It was like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, down from 4 to 6, and that's over 10 years. Then I got a little growth from 6 to 9 to 13, and I began to grow a little bit more. The most we've taken is 6. But again, systems, people, financials. Systems, which is operations, people, and financials.
All right, well, fantastic, fantastic. Mr. Williams.
My story is a little different, but the same afterwards. I had to open my second store because my first one was failed. I had to open my second because the first one was failing. And when I got the first one going, the second store started doing poorly. That forced me to open a third store. I had 2 stores that were canceling out one another, one making money, the other one losing money. So I still didn't have any money to bring home to my wife, and she didn't like that. So I said, this third store that was brought to me by Tim Williams, who's with me now. He started with me in 88, roughly. So he's been with me all that time. But after that, how do you select people that are working with you? That's who I wanted to concentrate on, to see if they would buy into the system. And let me tell you that if I'm going to tell my story, then I'm going to tell it right. Back in that time, we had African American young men who were behaving poorly. They thought they had a legitimate right to behave that way. My job was to change their mind. There's nothing wrong with the country. Well, every country has issues, but no place that you could be. And I just drill them with it. That you can do what I've done nowhere else. You can't go to China and do this. You can't go to South Africa and do this. You can't do it in England. Nowhere. Convince them that this is the greatest country in the world, and I can prove it to you. I'm sitting here. That was my mission, to teach that young man that if you go to work and work hard, that it will work for you. And that's still my mission. But everyone is welcome. Because the young man in Waco, the Caucasian man that gave me that first job, who treated me like I was his son, that man who taught me the traits of his business, that man who let me come by his house, that man who did not look like me, that man. So that's what I'm selling today. I'm still selling opportunities. I'm still selling my country. I'm still selling my business. I won't ever stop doing that. So if you know of anyone who want to participate in this country, who want to make it better by working hard, and that's what's missing for me. I can't find young men who are willing to work, open and close every day. And I told the young man, if you want to really make it, give me a year working from opening to closing, and I've got a good man. If you'll miss that birthday, if you'll miss that Christmas party, if you'll miss that concert, if you'll miss my wife's anniversary, and she still reminds me about that. But the person who builds the company, who builds the foundation, he cannot enjoy the benefit of that usually. You're building it for your kids, not for yourself. And I'm willing to make that sacrifice because it's okay if I don't have the fancy car and the fancy house. It's okay because whatever I have now is better than where I started back in Bastrop County. And that small wooden house that was leaning a little bit, that we had to prop up the edges with another cedar block. because the termites ate it out. That milking the cows and slopping the hogs and catching a bus at 7 o'clock and getting out of school and hitting that, doing the same thing over again and cutting the wood for the wood stove and all of that. All of that. So, who, Mr. Golden, who would not appreciate an opportunity like that to work for churches and later on own their own business?
Absolutely.
Just go to work. That's what I'm selling. You think I'm selling franchises? No. I'm selling my country. That's why I'm here today. I wouldn't have come to sell Williams Chicken, but I'll tell you about what I did and who made it possible for me. I'll tell you that story. But that's not why I'm here.
All right, well, fantastic.